with their art.
Ticket at contactinthedesert.net. See you at Contact in the Desert UFO Conference, August 9th through 11th. A weekend of exploration into ancient aliens, human origins, crop circles, UFO sightings, and new evidence of ongoing contact. A weekend of films, panels, lectures, and workshops will feature leading experts including George Noory and many more of some of the most important theorists and scientists in the field. Enter to win a free ticket at contactinthedesert.net. See you at Joshua Tree Retreat Center in August for Contact in the Desert, 760-365-8371.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Benetti, and along with Joe Montaldo, we host News on the Flip Side. Come join us every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Central for our 3-hour program. We have opinions on everything, and we're not afraid to share them. False history gets made all day, every day. The truth of the new is never on the news, but you can find it here with News on the Flip Side. Remember, don't be politically correct. Just be correct. Join us.
Tune in to UFO Undercover, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Welcome to another episode of the Dawn-of-Shades. I'm your host, Gia Scott, and we do have our usual announcements to make before we get started tonight. Like always, for all of our programs, I would love to have the audience's input with questions and comments. So you can email them to me at giascott@exogenynetwork.com. You can also email me with questions from previous guests, and I'll try and get those answered for you as well. Now, for all of you Facebookers out there, we do have a Facebook group specifically used for this radio program, and it provides you with an easy way to make comments or ask questions about the program in general. I don't monitor the page very closely during the program, so it's definitely not the best way to ask a question about a specific guest, and I would suggest using the email for that. And for all of those who are interested, I do also have an author page on Facebook, and I would like to invite everyone to visit it, give me a like for support, and find out what's going on. So with that, tonight's guest is a filmmaker based in Nevada, which has to be a nice, dry place for making films, if it's like the portions I've visited there before. And so I would like to offer Matt Crutcher a welcome to the program from Mississippi, which is everything but dry. Matt, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, thank you for having me on the show. I'm an independent filmmaker from Nevada with Lone Dog Productions. Website's lonedogproductions.com.
Okay. That was a nice, brief introduction. It didn't tell me a whole lot. See, now I'm going to have to poke and pry and find out. So, first of all, why'd you get into filmmaking?
I got into filmmaking because, when I was younger, I enjoyed writing poetry. And I started to fall in love with the storytelling process through poetry at the time. Submitted some poems, was published twice in a national magazine. And that kind of grew, had some more complicated ideas that I wanted to try and get out. I wanted to try and write those. And poetry, it wasn't going to work. It wasn't a proper format for poetry, so I learned how to write scripts. And I spent a couple of years learning how to write scripts and practicing writing scripts. And I had a realization that if I ever wanted to see the scripts that I had written, if I ever wanted to see them on film, I was either going to have to move to L.A. or I was going to have to learn how to make them. I'm not a big city kid by any means, so I went the latter, and I learned how to make film. And once I got into it and had some success at it, I really fell in love with the process and really have enjoyed what I've been doing. And Lone Dog Productions was founded in 2006. We have since been involved in 17 short films, 3 feature-length films, and 2 documentaries. In 2011, we won 2 awards, one for our short film, Loser, and another one for a documentary on the town of Dayton, which is about 50 miles from here. So that's kind of the background and how I got into it.
Okay, so do you have any projects that are currently in production or about to go into production?
I do. Actually, in the rest of the summer for 2013, we're involved in 3 short projects. One is an original script that I wrote, 17 pages. And for those who don't know, when you write a script, you can pretty much, if you have like a 15-page script, each page of the script is about a minute of film time. So if you write a 15-page script, you know you're going to be roughly about 15 minutes. So I have about a 17-minute feature-length short or feature short that we're going to be producing. We're actually going to be shooting that this coming Saturday, and then in the later weeks of August, we're actually going to be doing 2 other shorts. And what I'm doing is I'm kind of reconstructing scenes from other movies. I'm reconstructing a scene from the end of the movie Seven. And then I'm also reconstructing the diner scene from the movie Heat. I think it's significant because you don't see, most of the time when people go and retread, especially at the independent level, when people go and retread old movies, they usually do it, usually mess around with their buddies, and it's something that they want to put on YouTube or something like that. So there's no real, no disrespect to anybody out there, but there's really no production value to it. And that's what we're going to do, is we're actually going to retread these, and we're going to put a lot of production value into it. I just want to see if I can do it, and I feel like the idea's, fairly original. I like the idea of getting in and trying to retread it and see if I can tell a different type of story. One of the other things that I do is I have what I'm calling a film school called Maverick Movie Making. The website is maverickmoviemaking.blogspot.com. And what I want to do is with the shorts that I'm retreading is I want to use them as an example of how of a director's perception. My vision will be different than the director of Seven. My vision will be different than the director of Heat. And so that's kind of what I want to do, is I'm going to use it as a tool to show that you can, that your vision is each person's vision is different than another's, and the way one person interprets a script is completely different than the way another person, interprets a script. And so I'm actually looking forward to it. I'm actually all 3 of these movies are actually my acting debut as well. I've never been in front of the camera in anything that I've ever done, so we're also breaking new ground with that.
Now, are you nervous about getting in front of the camera?
No, because I'm directing it, and so it makes it to where it gives me a little bit less pressure, because I'm the one that is responsible for it in the end. And if it was for somebody else and somebody else was directing, I would definitely probably feel a little bit more anxious about being in front of the camera. So I am I guess to a point, I don't want it to, I don't want to be bad at it. I guess I don't want to really bring our movie down because I can't deliver what I say I'm going to deliver. And when you're independent movie making, when you don't have, it's all about not having a budget, not having money behind you. And so all the movies that I make, usually I either fund them myself or I find close friends or whatever to help me fund these. And when you're doing your movie making like that, time is money. I mean, the only way to get away with shooting a 17-minute short for, just a few $100s is that you have to have your timing and the amount of time that you spend out, you have to have that really dialed in. Uh-huh. And that is one of my concerns with me being in it, is that I'm going to drag that timeline out a little bit because, if I can't deliver something like that. So there are I am anxious a little bit, but not nearly as much as I would be if I was working for an outside director.
Uh-huh. Now, I realize that as an independent filmmaker that you're doing most of the funding yourself, but like the documentaries and stuff, do other people hire you to do a film for them?
Yes. A couple of years ago, here lately, I've kind of been on a bit of a hiatus. These three projects that we've got going on are my first projects that I've done in 2 years. Prior to that, we had been hired on a few occasions, the documentaries particularly, where we were hired by maybe subcontracted by another production company or hired individually. And with the case of the Dayton project, we were subcontracted by another local production company in town. But I've also worked personally. I've also lent my services or rented my services, however you want to put it, to be locations manager. I've been a locations manager before. I've been assistant director before. I've produced for other companies before. And that was when I was kind of getting my feet wet, when I was still kind of learning how to do it. One of the ways that I learned how to do it was I volunteered for anything and everything that had come through town, just so that I could see how other people did it. During that time, I got to work with Taylor Hackford, who directed Ray, and a movie called Love Ranch with Helen Mirren and Joe Pesci was filmed here, and I was privileged enough to be on set for that for 3 full days. I also got to be on set of a movie directed by Mario Van Peebles that hasn't come out yet called Kerosene Cowboys. And that was really good because that was a low budget film, and I was trying to figure out, at the time, how I was going to pull off, being able to duplicate and to kind of do the same thing that these production companies that have millions of dollars behind them. I was trying to figure out how I was going to do that. And I got to sit in on this Mario Van Peebles movie for 3 days or 2 days or whatever it was. And I got to see it. They had the crew of less than 50 people. And so I got to see how it was done on a small level. And what I learned was that there is no difference between what I do and what, I don't know, for example, Miramax does. There is no difference. Only it's all the same thing, only with a lot less people. And so that was a very important lesson, and it's given me the confidence to be able to do this very minimally, with the minimal amount of resources, and still have the confidence to pull off the same kind of quality that some of the bigger studios are able to do.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to hear you talking about it. For a number of years, I lived in a little town in Arizona called Florence, and they'd filmed several movies there. One movie, they blew up a building on Main Street, and, for 2 days we couldn't go to the post office, which that's where we had to get our mail. And they would bring in these big crews because they'd be big movies. The one was about, it was a love story set on a ranch that they built outside of Florence, and it had James Garner and the girl who was the flying nun.
Oh, okay.
You know who I'm talking about. I'm really bad with names sometimes, but anyhow, they had those two in it, and for me, as a person who lived in a very small town, because Florence was very small at that time, like 3,000 people that weren't in jail. Well, penitentiary was big business there, so most of the people in town were in prison. But, it was a very, very small town, and to have probably 200-300 people, arrive en masse to do all this movie stuff really disrupted the town. We had a hard time doing anything because, this part of the street's blocked off, that part of the street's blocked off, et cetera, et cetera. And, for me, it was just a case of irritation and inconvenience. I didn't care about the movie making at that time, and, I just wanted to go get my mail. Come on, are you done blowing up the gas station yet? Yeah. So I take it you don't blow up gas stations, right?
No. I don't know if I'll ever have money to blow anything up. But, most of that stuff you kind of cheat it, and then you either cheat it in your shot selection or you do it in post-production, which the editing software and the quality of the cameras have come so far that, almost anybody can do, some of the most fantastic things as far as that goes. Even in this the short that I wrote that we're going to be doing is called Rest Stop. And we're actually going to blow up my wife's car. And in that what I was just talking about doing it in post-production, and so we'll be blowing the car up, and that'll be new for me because I in the past I have always really made my movies really cut and dry so that to minimize the risk, because when you're out there shooting, you know what you're trying to accomplish, but it doesn't always work. And I've never really felt comfortable with hanging a project on something that might not work, and because if you've got a really key scene and it doesn't come out because you're trying to do something that is way beyond what your abilities, your movie's not going to come out, and it's not going to come out good. So to answer your question, no, I don't blow. I try to stay away from blowing things up or running people over and stuff like that. We usually trick it by our shot lists and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that with the special effects that films are capable of now, a lot of the stuff that went on, even 20 years ago, no longer has to. I mean, you don't really have to blow up the building. You don't really have to burn it down. It can be done on a much smaller scale without looking like the old Godzilla movies. Yeah, absolutely. With really bad special effects.
I was thinking Land of the Lost.
Yeah.
They you can get away with doing some pretty neat stuff. I mean, they have Final Cut and Adobe, which are two of the more popular editing programs. They have plugins, where you can create fire, or you can create an explosion, and they're relatively cheap. I mean, the latest version of Final Cut's only $300, and we're talking about the same editing program that they use for some big time movies, and of course there is a learning curve with doing the editing, and that takes a long time. When you're talking about filming movies, there are usually three phases of your movie. There's three versions of the movie. There's the version that you wrote, there's the version you shot, and the version you edit. All three of those can be different. And so it's sometimes it can be tough to stick to what you originally had, like case in point what I was talking about earlier about trying to be a little too aggressive with what you're trying to accomplish. That requires you in post-production to do something different, but thankfully, we are in the age that we're in for being filmmakers, and you can buy really nice cameras for a lot cheaper than you used to be able to. You don't have to mess with film, which film back in the 80s and the early 90s was really expensive, and that was the part that kept a lot of people from being able to do what I do. And the only reason that I'm able to do what I do is because all this stuff is relatively cheap compared to how it was back in those days. And the quality of what you could put out, I mean, everything's in high definition, and it's all relatively cheap. So it's a great time to be doing this kind of a job, you know?
Well, I think about it, even the computers that we're using. You know, my first home computer was a Commodore 64. My Commodore 64 cost more than my laptop and desktop combined by the time I bought all the gobbledygook.
Yeah, my cell phone has more memory than my first home computer did.
What's even scarier yet is to realize that they sent a man to the moon with less computing power than the old, what was it, Nintendo 64 or something like that. One of the early Nintendos. Still had more computing power than the Apollo missions had. And if somebody had ever told me, look, I'm going to use a Nintendo to send you to the moon, I said, you're out of your ever-loving mind.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that is frightening to think about, that, you know, we really could do a lot without it. And I think about, you know, the limits of even the computers a decade ago. I could still do a lot with it.
Yeah.
Computers are more user-friendly now, but sometimes they really frustrate me, because in the old days you could grab it by the throat and slam it up against the wall and make it do it.
Yeah.
Now you have to talk sweet, or it just gives you the blue screen of death.
When I started, you know, like I said, I started in 2006, and I actually edited my when I was going through the learning process. All I was doing was basically YouTube. It was real new, and so basically I was running out with a little tiny handheld home video camera, and I was filming whatever I could, whenever I could, and I was actually editing it on a computer that only had 256 RAM as far as memory goes. And man, you want to talk about frustrated. I did that for 2 years, and it took me a week and a half just to edit a 2-minute film. And so, you know, since then I've kind of upgraded, but like I said, it's all real cheap stuff. It's all, well, I don't know about real cheap, but it's fairly cheap, and it's a lot cheaper than trying to do editing with film, you know. And so, like I said, it's a great time to be able to, you know, if you have a creative type of mind and filmmaking something that you're looking at, this is a great time to be in that frame of mind, you know. Yeah.
So once you make your movies, what happens next? You know, where does people see them? How do you get the people to look at them?
It depends on the quality. It depends on if I got what I wanted. You know, really, for my purpose, if I feel like I put out a good product, I will actually take them and run the festival circuit. Festival circuit. There's a website called withoutabox.com. That has all the festivals that are available throughout the world. There's thousands of them. And the festival season, I usually call that as from January to January. And then I put them on those and try to get some sort of recognition for them. If I didn't nail what I wanted, I usually put it up on YouTube. But for the ones that really do turn out well, after I've run the festival circuit, and I'll put them up, usually most of the time I'll put them up on a website called IndieFlix, IndieFlix.com. It's real similar to Netflix, only it's specifically geared towards the independent market. You know, it's geared for people who won't necessarily be able to get their films onto iTunes or Netflix or something like that, and it's still a way to get out. And so I've been really fortunate to be able to meet the folks from IndieFlix. When I finished my first short called The Apparition, that I was fortunate enough to go to the Palm Springs Short Fest for that, and I was able to meet the owner of IndieFlix when they were still relatively new. And so I've subsequently been able to put 3 of the movies that I finished up on IndieFlix, and it's been a really good relationship. But that's pretty much what I do with them. I mean, it comes after a time. A movie after you've finished it kind of has a shelf life. You can only submit it to so many different types of festivals before it's run its course. Because you do run the risk of saturating the market with your name and with one particular film, and so you have to be careful not to do that. And that's especially prevalent when you're running around in Hollywood circles, because if people start hearing your name too much, you start one project keeps getting out there and nobody picks it up, then it kind of becomes a bit taboo. And so you run the shelf life of your movie as far as you feel it will go, and then you try to find yourself a distributor on any type of level just to get it out. And if I may, if anybody's interested in the 3 movies that are up on IndieFlix, you can go to LoneDogProductions.com, and all 3 of the movies that I've put up are available on IndieFlix.
Okay. I had never heard of IndieFlix before, so I would definitely have to check it out, because that does sound interesting. Now, we do have a question that came in from the virtual auditorium, and that is, why does it cost millions to make a movie?
It costs millions to make a movie because that's a good question. It costs. I mean,
obviously, if you got big names, you're paying big dollars right there just to get your actors on the set.
Right. And okay, in my experience, I have been on a couple of big shows in my career, and you have 3 guys who are getting paid top dollar to carry around a pen for the director, instead of or you got one guy who is operating the camera, and then you got another guy who's operating the boom mic, you got another guy who's operating a reflector, right? You basically you've got one guy doing one job, and because the big studios are all involved in unions, they're not allowed to cross over into somebody else's they're not allowed to cross over into somebody else's job duty. And like for Terminator, McGee, he spent $10 million on his location scouting. What cost $10 million to go look at where you want to shoot your film? It was all filmed down in New Mexico. What cost $10 million to do that?
They didn't stay in the same motels I've stayed in New Mexico. I'll guarantee that.
Yeah, but you know what? You could. That's the thing is and I understand that fame and fortune has its perks, but it on that note of cost, is it feels like that they're more concerned with the fame and fortune than they're concerned with the work. And so, even if I were on that level, even if eventually throughout my career I get to that level, I want to stay on the same fundamentals that I do now, because I believe that the work is better for it. If you've got everything perfect and you've got everybody, it's like anything else. Sometimes the mistakes that you make and the things you overlook give your film character, and so that's an important piece. I think that the mistakes and the way that you get around your problems, because no shoot goes as perfect as you would like it to go. The way that you move around getting through that mistake is what gives your film its character, and I think that some of that character is what is missing from a lot of the really big time Hollywood big budget movies. I mean, you look at your independent market right now, and a lot of actors are going to those because the creativity is a little better, and the stories in most cases are more rich. So, but anyway, to answer your question, I believe it's a bunch of
sort of a bloated budget.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that they do that to enhance the luxury of being in the business. I really do think that's what they do, because as an independent filmmaker, I know that a lot of the stuff that they do, they don't have to do it that way. They do it because that's the way it's always been done, and nobody knows better, you know. But, you know,
I was thinking, you know, for $10 million, I'll visit all 50 states and I'll film every obscure corner known to man.
I could make, you know, I could make a hell of a movie for $10 million. You know, I really could. Man, I could make, you know, I could make Desperado for $10 million, no problem. You know.
Well, you know, when we were talking about road trips and movies before we went on the air today, one movie that I think of, and if I'm not mistaken, it was considered a low-budget movie, and yet it did very well at the box office and got very good reviews, was Dances with Wolves.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know how low-budget, you know, it was, whether it was low-budget compared to Independence Day or low-budget compared to what I would consider low-budget. I don't know. But, you know, it is a case of a movie that didn't have this incredible budget that a lot of, like a Spielberg movie would have.
Sure. And, you know, it's interesting about Kevin Costner is that particular movie is what taught him about the politics and the ins and out of the movie business. And to this day, he actually, most of the movies that he makes are done outside of the studio system. Like he did The Guardian and Open Range. I guess Open Range is a better example because he produced and directed that. Well, they did that for about $12 million, you know, and they had to build that town. You know, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, but most of it takes place in this old-time Western town, and they had to build they had to build it. They didn't go find an old ghost town. They actually built this place. And he did it for about $12 million. And, you know, if you look at some of the behind the scenes in that, he kind of dances around his discontent with the studio system, you know. And I've been close, I guess, to the studio system on a few different occasions, and I didn't really enjoy how I felt. I didn't enjoy how I felt about the business when I had kind of taken a step back, you know. And so independent filmmaking does have its benefits for sure, you know. And one of the things they like Gangs of New York, for example. I believe that's a Scorsese film, and the studio. This is Martin Scorsese we're talking about. The studio tried to tell him how to tell that story, you know. And I mean, that really takes a lot of brass, because I don't know if there's many people on the face of the earth that could tell that man how he should make his movie, but they wanted to anyway. And so, as an independent filmmaker, that's one of the perks, is that you get to keep creative control, you know. And if you go into the studio system, you won't get that, you know. You don't necessarily get that. They make you make your movie on what they think is going to put people in seats, you know. Right.
Well, you know, independent arts of all kinds, whether it's music, books, literature, movies, you know, everything. It's exploding because of the advent of the digital age. We're no longer dependent on things like studios and publishing houses and so forth and so on to put our art into a form that can be disseminated to the public.
Right. I think that you know, I know that you know, YouTube is a good format for or a good platform, I should say, for movie makers. And there's a music website that's real similar. It's like a independent iTunes kind of thing, to where if you're a musician who doesn't have any kind of backing, you put your music up on this website, and it's kind of an independent iTunes type of thing. Real similar to IndieFlix, you know. I mean, if it wasn't for IndieFlix, the only people who would see my movies are my family, you know, in my living room, you know.
Right.
And so it's those kind of things, you know. I'm really grateful that I've had the opportunity to actually have those up, you know. I really am. So. Yeah,
it is kind of interesting to see sort of. Really, independent artists are the people's art.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Because it's not, politically correct necessarily. It's not sanitized and so forth and so on. In the same way that media that goes through the old familiar channels seems to be there's a bottleneck going on there, and only certain things, whatever they think is marketable or what they think the public wants to see. And in addition, one of my complaints has always been that the niche markets, things, in my case, I happen to be very fond of documentaries, but some of the things I'm interested in, it's not really commercially viable for a studio to go and make a documentary on, how to do some particular craft or how to make something or whatever skill that I'm interested in or whatever place I'm interested in. And now in the digital age, you're seeing more of that kind of material being produced.
Right. Yeah, you can, anything that you really want to know, it seems like anything you really want to know, let's say you want to know what it looks like to drive from Portland to Seattle, I guess. I'm sure that there is a video clip out there of some dude driving from Oregon to Seattle, so, yeah. It is,
well, I know that when I lived in New Orleans, one time I took my air card and my webcam, and I stuck my webcam on the dash with my laptop in the seat. I drove around, and I gave several friends a running tour of, this is what New Orleans really looks like.
Yeah. So it's a great time.
And it was post Katrina, so there were people that were genuinely interested.
Yeah.
Because what you saw in the media and what you saw when you walked down the street were not the same necessarily.
Right. And with the platform like YouTube, they actually YouTube actually has like ad sharing, and basically you get if you get enough hits on anything that you do, you can get half of the proceeds from any ads that go up on your site or on the video itself, and then you get like a certain cut. Pay per click, like, I don't know, off the top of my head, like 10 cents for every view that you get where the viewer watches through the whole thing. And so, kind of backing up to your distribution question, if you don't have the opportunity like I had, like Indie Flicks, if you're making good content and it'll come out, and you can get people to go to your YouTube site and watch your videos, that can kind of help, with making a little bit of money. And although the money is not even any kind of an issue whatsoever, it does help fund next projects. It does help reap some of the costs that you put out. I mean, I've put out since I started this thing in 2006, I think I've probably spent close to $15,000, and I think I've made maybe $500. And so, so anything that you can kind of get out there to try and, incur a little bit back of those costs is important. And so that's kind of, it's if you ever have the thoughts of being an independent filmmaker or something like that, it definitely has to be something that you love, because the money is not always available to be made, and so that's kind of what you have to choose.
Well, it's sort of like being an independent radio program.
Absolutely.
You spend a lot, but you're not going to get rich on it. Or, in my case, I'm an independent author. Anybody who thinks you're going to get rich quick from writing books, I got another piece of news for you. It won't happen. Granted, an independent author can do well. Most people just get a little bit back, enough to buy printer ink, maybe.
Sure.
We do have another question coming in. This one's sort of a little bit away from the movie thing, probably drawing more on your Western expertise. But this question comes in from England, and they want to know, are there still any deserted towns where you can just go and wander around without a tour guide?
Yes. Well, I don't know about without a tour guide, but there's a town just on the other side of the border into California called Bodie. and it is during the 1800s. It was one of the, like, for a year, it was like the murder capital of the West, and it was one of the most dangerous places to live during this time in the 1880s. Well, when the gold rush, when the gold dried up, basically, people left this town in droves, and that's how they, obviously that's how they got the ghost town thing, but it still stands, and it's actually a national monument type park thing, and there is a ranger that lives out there, but you can tour this thing. You can tour this little town called Bodie, and it is in the same condition that it was when they left in the 1880s. And so, and I can kind of tie that back into movie making. Is those are the places, if you ever wanted to do a Western and you wanted to do it independently, in an independent way, that a place like that is a perfect place to do it because, it's cheap, it's a full functioning town, and you don't have to build nothing. It's already there.
Well, that's the ghost towns I'd toured. I would say were closer to ruins. They were interesting places, but you'd see curious things. There was a place not far from where I lived in northern Arizona called Canyon Diablo. And once upon a time, they were the murder capital of the United States. Okay. One of their sheriffs lasted an hour before he was killed. Yeah, it wasn't exactly a civilized place. And they had a really high, the reason for the town was they were building an incredibly high bridge. It was the highest bridge in America for a while. I don't know what era, but back probably in the late 1800s. And it's a gorgeous place. It's also very remote. But they had this really strange thing. The railroad obviously ran through there. And they had this really strange thing. It was this cement channel. And there was still sulfur residue in it. I don't know what they were doing out there. There was no mining out there. But it's still, after all these years of being weathered and unprotected and abandoned, still had that sulfur residue.
Really?
It still smelled bad. Like I said, I don't know what they were doing. I never did manage to figure that out. But that was at one point in northern Arizona. That was the rail station, and they had a trading post there and a post office. So it had been an important place for a very brief period of time, and then the bridge was finished, and one side of Canyon Diablo was connected to the rest of Arizona, and off went the railroad on towards Flagstaff, I guess it would have been, and California to finish connecting east to west.
Wow. Wow.
Most of the ghost towns in Arizona are literally just foundations. There's nothing left. Everything that could be carried off was carried off.
Wow.
Over the years, or termites got it or something. But
we did a movie. We did a movie called Loser. It was like a 16-minute short, and I actually shot it right outside of Virginia City at an old abandoned silver smelting facility. And all that was left of that was the concrete walls and foundations. And so what we ended up doing is Loser had an Iraqi war scene in it. And I used this little abandoned smelting place as my destroyed Iraqi town. And so, back, in the independent movie making aspect of it, if you open your mind to what can be done, you can really pull off some really neat stuff, totally out of context from what you're really doing,
They did that reality show, I forget which channel did it, about some post-apocalyptic sort of scenario, and they used part of East New Orleans, which was pretty much wiped out by Katrina, and so there's these standing buildings and fences and nobody living there anymore. And the buildings are pretty much thrashed.
Yeah.
And so it worked very well for a post-apocalyptic scene, and most of those buildings are still standing there, and the weeds are just higher, and the snakes probably more prevalent, but they're still, it's like a ghost town.
Yeah.
Because it's an area that it's known it's going to flood again. And nobody's gone back and built those things back up. it was kind of creepy that at first after Katrina, you could have done all sorts of post-apocalyptic things out there. For a long time, several months at least, there were some car dealers that were right off of Interstate 10, and the cars were still sitting in the lot with the watermarks on them.
Really?
Yeah, there they sat, and you drive, because that whole area would be dark. And like when I'd be going from New Orleans to, I think we made a trip to Florida, or if I was going to Mississippi for some reason, you would, drive through this area, and if you were driving at night, it was like there was nothing there because there were no lights anymore. Nothing had been, it took a year before anything really was happening in a lot of that section. And it was months before the water was all gone. And so you'd go through this, and it would be pitch dark. And when you'd see it in the daytime, it was like, it did look like you could use it for war zones, post-apocalypse, almost anything.
Yeah, and see, that's what, when I'm doing my script writing, it's also one of the things I talk about on the Maverick movie making. But when I'm doing my script writing, it's a lot easier for your budget, time, and creativity if you, like the scenario that you just talked about, you start there. If you have something that's really interesting looking that is out of the ordinary, like an abandoned town, you start there. You start with the resources that you have on hand. That way, when you go in and, you start doing all your pre-production is really easy because you have everything available to you, like the short film Rest Stop that we're going to be doing this coming up weekend. I basically wanted, like I had said before, it's been almost 2 years since I've done a film, and I'm trying to, I wanted to make sure that I kind of dipped my toe in, before I jumped all in. I mean, that was the intent. I didn't stick to that now that we're in the heat of it, but that's what I wrote this Rest Stop script based on, is I thought about my friends that I could get to be in the movie with me, where I could shoot it that was close to my house and with the resources that I have. And basically I used, like I said, I asked my friends to come in and be in with me. I'm in it. I've got my cars, my wife's car and my car as the main vehicles to push the story, and it's only about 30 miles. Both of my locations are about 30 miles from my house. And so that's a really good way to start getting the creative juices flowing as you look around your home, you look around your area, and you try to find things that you could base a story around. Like one of the examples that I love to fall back on all the time is if you had like a briefcase that you did nothing with that's been sitting in your closet for the last 2 years, well, there is your goal. If you're going to write a script, there's your goal, whatever's in the briefcase, and it always kind of starts there. And that's the way that, that's the way that I do most of my writing, and it makes the entire process much easier because you have everything readily available. And when time is money and all that stuff, that's huge. That's very important to have all those resources available whenever you need them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm listening to you talk about this, and it reminds me, years ago, I worked with a guy, and he had this dream about me. And in this dream, I was, wearing this really outlandish, like gypsy outfit. And at that time, I worked at Meteor Crater in Arizona. And there was a very large meteor. And in this, I think when he originally had the dream, I was a tour guide. Anyhow, I had started to give a tour. He was supposed to give it, but instead I'd started giving the tour. But I was, doing this very theatrical production, dressed in inappropriate clothes as a gypsy, and lounging on top of this large meteorite. And so the whole thing was, time passed by. He'd quit, and then he came back to work there and whatnot. Well, one day, because I told everybody, I said, one of these days I'm going to dress up like that, and I'm going to just scare the tar out of him doing this. And I'd come upon the perfect dress to wear, and I'd come upon the perfect place to get a whole bunch of bangles for like 50 cents. I'd like 200 of them for less than $1. And, I borrowed some makeup, so I had loud makeup because that really wasn't my style either. And did the real poofy long hair thing and the whole bit, really did the gypsy routine. And set it up with everybody. I chose a Monday morning. First tour of the day, because there's nobody there on Monday mornings, wrong. Anyhow, when we go to do it, it turns out like a whole bunch of people are there. So everybody, that worked there was in on it except him when he was being kept at the other end of the building with some nonsense errand, so that I had time to get up there and climb up on top of this giant steel rock. Anybody who thinks that climbing up on a giant steel rock is going to be a comfortable place to sit, oh no. It's hard and lumpy in all the wrong places. Anyhow, so get up there, and now it's like, what do I do with all these people here that weren't supposed to be here, this early? So I just told them, look, I'm playing a practical joke on the tour guide, and so you're kind of in on it. Right. And so they had fun with it, and a lot of people videotaped it. I also had somebody videotaping. I've lost the tape over since then, but it was a lot of fun, and he knew me awful well because the first thing he does, because this is a long dress, goes clear to my ankles, he pulls it up to see what I'm wearing underneath, which was like fuchsia-colored spandex shorts or something, because he knew I was wearing something under that skirt, knowing me. Yeah. So yeah, we did have a lot of fun with the whole thing, and a lot of fun setting it up. So I can see where an idea could actually spawn sort of a fun short, or perhaps even an entire story. I mean, I know the little things that inspire me to write, and it's not a huge jump to go from, a written or oral story to a story that's being translated into film. Right.
I have a movie called The Apparition, and interestingly enough, after I had written and shot that, they had a guy named Todd Lincoln wrote a movie called The Apparition, and it has Tom Felton, who is the albino blonde kid from the Harry Potter movies. He's in it. But anyway, I wrote this movie called The Apparition when I was 24. My father passed away, and the years following that, I had a lot of sometimes they talk about when you look over and you think you see somebody, and then you look back and they're not there. I was having a lot of those happening to me, and then I was having a bunch of weird dreams and stuff over the course of these 2 years. And everything, and most of the stuff that those weird occurrences that had happened to me during that time are that movie. That movie is almost everything that, everything that I was having, like visions and weird dreams and stuff like that. And so what I did was I made a movie out of it. And for me, one of the main reasons that I'm in this business and that I've decided to do this was because it is my outlet. If I don't do this, if I didn't make The Apparition, I guess back up. After I made The Apparition and it was done, that stuff started going away. And what I have found out is over the course of the last 2 years when I wasn't doing anything, if I didn't, it's a creative outlet. And over these last 2 years, I have not quite felt the same, And so when stuff's bothering me or I'm having some sort of issue in personal life, these films and stuff are my creative outlet of how to get it out of me and to share it with other people. And ultimately, I end up feeling better, And so to kind of bring that back around, just like you had talked about, I use my personal experience, and use them as fuel for projects. I mean, when I first did, when I first started Lone Dog Productions, my slogan was life on display, or my life on display, because that was what I was doing. Is I was just any emotion that I had, and it felt like it was going to be a good idea. Throw it out there.
Yeah. Well, I can definitely understand that. My daughter and I still will talk about a road trip we took in, let's see, it must have been about 1994. We were going on I-40, and we were between Amarillo, Texas, and Tucumcari, New Mexico. And there was a truck stop, and I needed gas, and we needed bathrooms. And it was the middle of the night, like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And my daughter was about 12, I guess, and my son was 4, I believe. And so we stopped, and we all three went inside, and it was the strangest experience I'd ever had. It was like everything was wrong. It looked like the stuff on the shelves had been there since 1950-something, and the people all looked like their family tree didn't branch, and they all fell off of the same trunk. And, I mean, it was just really, really weird.
Yeah.
And even the gas pumps were, like, old. And we went to the bathroom, and I didn't buy anything, and I didn't buy my gas either. I told the kids, let's go. I mean, I had the heebie-jeebies. I mean, this was, like, creepy, creepy, creepy. And it was about the Texas-New Mexico border, you know, right in that area. Yeah. And we got back in the car, and we got back in the interstate, and we left. Now, I've made that drive numerous times, and so has my daughter. We've never been able to find the exit, let alone the station.
Really? Yeah.
Really seriously. I mean, we still talk about that. We've asked other people about it because it was very distinct, because the interstate was higher than the than this little old truck stop. And there were, like, some cottonwood trees there, and it was down lower than the interstate itself. And it was the only thing there. You got off, and it went to the gas station, and then you got back on, and you went back onto the interstate. It doesn't exist.
Wow.
And other people that have made that, know that road real well have said, there's never been one like that. I'm like, yes, there was, because we stopped there.
Yeah, you know what? If there's any other independent filmmakers listening, you just gave every single one of them a cool idea for a short.
It was so creepy, and I'm not kidding. It was like something out of a bad episode of Twilight Zone. And people talk about truth is stranger than fiction. Oh, yeah. I mean, that was one of those things where people look at you like you've lost your mind. And I know I didn't imagine it. I know I didn't hallucinate it. We talked about it for a good hour because not even the kids could go to sleep after that.
Wow, that's
I mean, it really, really weirded us all out.
Yeah. Huh.
And the gas station doesn't exist. The exit doesn't exist. Because I was bound and determined to find that place.
Yeah.
And I was hoping to at least find that it had burned down or something like that. But I remember there were 3 people in that store working, which I thought was very odd for this little bitty place in the middle of nowhere at that time of the night. To have 3 people inside the store. And you had to go up like 8 steps to go to the bathroom. And it was so creepy. We all 3 went into the bath, son and all. Now, granted, he was a little guy, but we all 3 went into the same restroom together. And it was one of these, just the toilet sink, and that was it in the restroom. And, it was just, told Josh, turn around.
Yes.
And, that was the deal. I didn't even want him going into the men's room alone because there was something not right.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's awesome. Yeah, that would make a really good story. That really would. That would, right out of the Twilight Zone for sure.
Yeah, somebody would say, oh, you ripped it off from Twilight Zone. It's not, no, that really happened to us. But, hey, it is time for us to take a break. So, folks, while we're away from your computer, check out Mac's website at lonedogproductions.com. And don't move a muscle. We'll be right back after this little short break.
Cemetery, where the paranoia about the paranormal comes to rest.
Follow us on Twitter and subscribe to us on Facebook. Also, check us out on our website, mindcemetery.com, for show updates and the critically acclaimed Mind Cemetery blog.
It's not critically acclaimed, but you should check it out anyway, mindcemetery.com.
Join us for Contact in the Desert UFO Conference, August 9th through 11th. A weekend of exploration into ancient aliens, human origins, crop circles, UFO sightings, and new evidence of ongoing contact. A weekend of films, panels, lectures, and workshops will feature leading experts including George Noory and many more of some of the most important theorists and scientists in the field. Enter to win a free ticket at contactinthedesert.net. See you at Joshua Tree Retreat Center in August for Contact in the Desert, 760-365-8371.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Benetti, and along with Joe Montaldo, we host News on the Flip Side. Come join us every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Central for our 3-hour program. We have opinions on everything, and we're not afraid to share them. False history gets made all day, every day. The truth of the new is never on the news, but you can find it here with News on the Flip Side. Remember, don't be politically correct. Just be correct. Join us.
Tune in to UFO Undercover, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Welcome back to the Dawn of Shades. I'm your host, Gia Scott, and tonight we are talking with Mac Crutcher from Lone Dog Productions. Mac, before we get started with our conversation, you want to tell everybody where they can find your website?
Yeah, I can be found at lonedogproductions.com. It has all of our background. It has our upcoming projects. It has links to the projects that we've done, where they can be seen. Once again, that's lonedogproductions.com.
Right. Now, I know you got 3 upcoming projects. You want to give us approximate release dates when people might be able to find a way to see them, whether it's at a festival? Are these 3 anticipated to go to a festival first?
Well, the 3 projects that I got coming up, one is an original short. It's about 17 minutes long that I wrote called Rest Stop. And we're going to be filming that one this coming up weekend here in Nevada. And then I'm doing 2 kind of retreads, reinterpretation of 2 scenes from existing movies. One is the ending scene from Seven, and then the other one is the diner scene from Heat. The original Rest Stop, that one is definitely where we're shooting to be able to make it a good enough quality to get into the festival circuit and to hopefully be approved to distribute it on IndieFlix. The 2 remakes, if you will, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with those yet. I haven't quite been down this road before. I don't even know if I have if I'm able to do this or to show it to anybody, because it is remakes of somebody else's work. And so after I make them, I'm going to be doing some research as to whether or not this is putting them up for festivals or on my web out for distribution is even something that I'm legally able to do. At the bare minimum, I do want to put them up on my website that I have called MaverickMovieMaking.com, or Maverick Movie Making Blogspot. It's a blog that I run that basically teaches people how to make movies the way that I made movies. And what I want to do with them is I want to use them as an example of a director's vision and how my vision, is different from the original director's. And it's just going to be kind of an example as to how one script can be interpreted in many different ways. But right now, that's my only plan for the other two. The Rest Stop, we'll kind of see how it does in the festivals. If I'm able to win or win an award for it, that will help me get distribution. But if you go to LoneDogProductions.com and keep checking into there, I usually update that with the status of our new projects on a regular basis.
Okay. Now, have you thought about teaching workshops or anything like that?
Believe it or not, I'm actually not that good at speaking to crowds. I'm not that good at being the center of attention. I'm not really comfortable with it.
Well, people often don't believe me when I tell them that I'm incredibly shy. So, actually, I can believe it. It's funny that I am incredibly shy, yet public speaking doesn't bother me. All right, find the logic in that one. And the difference is I'm incredibly shy, but I have this, I guess, ability to disassociate myself. I probably have some psychological disorder. But when I'm giving a presentation, since I'm not talking about me, I've never had to give one about who I am. I'm not talking about something that's me. I'm talking about something else. Whether I'm doing edutainment or whether I'm doing something like this, I'm not talking about who I am. I'm not being judged. So it doesn't bother me to get up and talk to people, and do if that makes any sense. I also was a stutterer. So in school I did a lot of public speaking classes and drama classes and that kind of thing as a way of coping with the stuttering.
Right. I do what I on the website because I feel like the audience that I can help or that I can reach via the internet is much greater than the audience that I could reach should I host workshops in my own town. I actually live outside of Reno, and the independent film market in Reno is slim to none. And I feel like the market's just not there to actually do in-person workshops and stuff like that. And I'm not.
I don't know about movie making ones, but I took a screenwriting screenplay workshop. I guess 6 years ago or so. Oh. A lot of anytime I'm taking a workshop from somebody, they usually don't live there. They travel. Right. And they set up these workshops, usually, with some of them they have, staff that set them up and they deal with, things from finding the location to collecting the money. Other times it's smaller and, one guy does it all, depending on kind of the price range you're paying for it, too. My workshop was sponsored through a community college, so it wasn't, because some of these workshops I've recently looked into, they want like $300-400 for a 4-hour workshop. Right. To be honest, in my really lucrative career as a independent radio host and independent author, I can't afford that kind of workshop. Yeah. So, I've had to pass on those. But I do know a lot of people, the bulk of their income is teaching workshops and teaching other people how to do it. And I know, like, the one I took in New Orleans on screenplays, there was maybe 6 or 8 of us there. I mean, we're not talking about hundreds of people. It was a relatively small group. And I was just curious because I know from personal experience, anytime I'm teaching things to other people, I develop a whole new level of confidence and actually skill. Because for some reason, for me at least, I learn more when I'm teaching the skill than I do when I'm doing it.
Sure.
Which is probably the least logical thing you probably ever heard anyone say. But there's something about teaching it to somebody else that increases your understanding of what it is you're doing.
Right. And I've kind of set this up. It's once again, it's at LoneDogProductions.com. I have basically set this up to where I'm starting with the basics of script writing, and we move into every single aspect of pre-production. I give folks the tools that they need. Like there's a script writing template actually on there that people can download. But what I like about the format is, like we were talking about earlier about the technology that we're able to do is, you know, a guy can at his convenience, you know, go through the videos that I posted up there, and it's on his time, you know, and there's no pressure to show up at a certain time every week or whatever. And so that's what I really like about it. And one of the things that I really like to try and do is I like to shoot the vlogs that I do, the video logs for it. I like to do those on location. You know, I actually go out and I'll actually shoot it out in the desert. If I'm like one of the script writing ones, I put myself in this like dry riverbed, and I talk about how the riverbed could be used in the movie. You know, and so that's what I kind of try to make it fun and engaging, you know, in that manner. And then in that also, I've put resources up that anybody who's interested in getting started. There's a resources page at Lone Dog Productions that is basically a starter kit for somebody who wants to jump into the movie business. And I guess not even jump in. I guess it's kind of tiptoe in. But it's a relatively inexpensive starter kit that a person can you know, basically start, and once they've started, you know, with the lessons, they can watch each one, and it would basically get them to the end. You know, it basically teach them every single step that they needed to know as to how to make an independent movie. You know, and we also had kind of touched on the bloatedness of Hollywood. Well, the way that I do things cuts all that out, and I teach people how they don't need half the stuff that they need. You know, that a big budget movie needs, I guess.
Right.
And so
how to get the most bang out of your buck, which is, you know, something that's very important for anybody who's doing independent art of any kind.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely that's the whole key, you know, and that's the key to success when it comes to movie making, is getting the most bang for the buck. You know, it's the technical term is production value, and so, you know, you try to make a movie. You know, my goal ultimately is always to be able to make a quality of movie that you could put up against a studio movie, and if you didn't know who made them, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, and that's the goal. In the type of writing that I do and the type of shooting that I do, that's my goal. Is I want a person to not know the difference, and it can be done, and I've proved that it can be done. So, yeah.
You know, a lot of people are interested in at least learning how to put together a good family home video.
Right.
You know, for one thing, nobody lives forever. You know, so it would be really nice to create a video that could be shown to your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids even, that tells a story. Right. I mean, most families have this incredibly rich oral history, but the art of storytelling and the art of listening to the family stories is kind of being forgotten. You know, like on one side of my family, I'm probably the last one that heard the stories. Has anybody been interested in hearing them from me? No. Do I remember them all? No. You know, some of these stories I heard when I was 10 years old, and believe me, I'm ever so much more than 20 now. You know, just remembering this incredibly rich tapestry of stories about family members that, you know, I don't even remember the name to, let alone anyone else, is kind of getting lost. And so to be able to tell the story, which is, you know, granted you can write it down, but sometimes it's so much better if you can tell the story. You know, right. This is what I see. This is, you know, where I went. This is where the cemetery is. This is where, you know, my great-grandma's house was. And this is where we went to pick apples. To show these places is a lot more thrilling, you know, when you've got a video camera and you know, somebody's filming as you walk along telling the story, than it is to sit down and, you know, have an audio tape with some photographs.
Right. No, I agree. Yeah, it'd be kind of neat to do it in like intriguing documentary style. You know, if you were going to retell your family history, you know, it'd be really cool to kind of do it in a documentary style. You know, I think that'd be neat.
Yeah, you know, my sister and I were recently, you know, doing some more work on the family tree and finding out things like, you know, I have ancestors that fought in the Revolutionary War. I have ancestors that fought for the Confederacy. I have ancestors that were buried right here in Mississippi, others that were buried just over the border into Alabama. You know, and I didn't even realize when I moved to Mississippi that I had any connection at all with the state, ever.
Huh.
You know, and yet, you know, on one side of my mom's family, there was actually, you know, this incredibly fascinating history. And finding out, you know, where they lived, how they lived, you know, that's kind of, for me, it's filling in the blanks, because I'm always interested in why people did things. Knowing dates and stuff, that's boring school history stuff. But knowing why people did the things they did, why they lived the place they did, why they chose to marry who they did, or why they chose to follow a particular profession. Why was there this strange divorce in this peculiar, you know, in this era when people didn't get divorced? And, you know, then why does he show up in boarding houses forever after? Well, now you're wondering, okay, was this guy an alcoholic, and that what the issue was? You know, why did they do these things? And will we ever find the answers? Maybe we will, maybe we won't. You know, history is kind of intriguing, but it's a lot more than census documents and tax rolls, too.
Oh, sure. Oh, absolutely.
And, you know, I can see where, you know, doing a documentary, especially if you know these things on your family history, would create an impressive package to share with your family. You know, even if you never shared it with anybody else, you know, it's a whole lot more interesting than slapping a coat of arms on your wall.
Oh yeah, and you know, and that's the kind of stuff, you know, and the kind of that's the kind of stuff that the resources on my website, you know, it's even catered for stuff like that. I haven't gotten it up yet, but I have a video about how to make an interesting little piece for a YouTube or to be for your family. I mean, it's going to be posted fairly soon, but we go into even, you know, we go into all kinds of aspects, including those, you know, for a guy who isn't looking to be a movie maker, but just wants to make an intriguing video, you know. We go into how to do that, you know. And so I really enjoy the format, you know, and on the same note, I'm not the type of person who likes schedules, you know. I don't like to have to be somewhere every Monday at 7, you know. And so I'm able to make these vlogs at my convenience or when I get a moment, you know. And I like the format of that too, you know. So.
Yeah, and you know, I can see where it would, because it would be really fun. Like a book I just released last month is called All American Biscuit, And in there I talk about, something as simple as the American biscuit and its history. And its history, I thought, was interesting. And from the reviews that I've gotten of the book, other people did too. The biscuit, it's so simple, but it has an amazing amount of history that goes behind it, how it was created, early ways of rising it. I didn't include all of them, what is saleratus and however it's pronounced, but it's not something that we currently use today. It happens to be an early predecessor to baking powder, or, how to make beaten biscuits, which is the only really old style recipe I included. But this is a biscuit that you take a hammer or a mallet or something and you beat the dough with it, which theoretically traps pockets of air in it, which will leaven the biscuit. Okay, well, either people used to beat much better than I do, or something. But anyhow, mine you probably could have used for hockey pucks. But I even told the story of when I learned to make biscuits, and I actually did it to please my great-grandfather when he came for a visit one year. He came with my youngest aunt and her kids and my grandmother, and he said he didn't like light bread, which is what he called store-bought bread, and preferred biscuits. So I thought, I would please him and I would make biscuits. I was just about to enter high school, so I was at the age when being cool was usually what I was worried about, and biscuit making didn't go real well at first, but I have to admit, he ate the biscuits and was very complimentary, and I don't know how he didn't break his teeth. They were dreadful. We went from pebbles that were perfect for slingshot ammunition, which my brother undoubtedly did, to boulders. They were large but still rock hard. And eventually I did manage to get biscuits before he went home, for which he was probably very grateful, because it was probably a case of he was either hoping to go home soon or I would get better at it. Yeah. And I mastered the biscuit. And did I brag to my friends at school? No. I wouldn't have admitted it to anyone that I had spent, a month trying to make biscuits. But yeah, it was one of those funny little things that you do and go on from there. But biscuits I found were interesting.
Yeah, sometimes you find the strangest places of creativity. I find myself in that position all the time.
Yeah, well, you were talking about apparition, having been born from your own personal experiences and having strange dreams and thinking you saw someone and whatnot. The novel that I released this spring was actually dreamed into existence. It was like a serial dream. And so eventually it became the entire book. I also referred to it as, my pain management program, because I wrote the book, the bulk of it was written the first 6 months after I was injured and was dealing with the initial pain issues and whatnot. And that was what I would immerse myself in when I couldn't sleep. Huh. And then when I did sleep, I would dream some more of the book. So it was kind of an interesting process. The initial writing went fast because it was almost as though I was possessed sometimes. I thought, why am I dreaming this weird dream and then having to write it? But it worked, and then, of course, came the editing, which I'm sure movies, you spend a lot more time in editing than you do in filming, don't you?
Yeah, like the shoot we have coming up this weekend, we're actually only going to be shooting for 12 hours, or we're scheduled to shoot for 12 hours, in which a 17-minute movie to be shot in 12 hours is a very aggressive schedule. I did a movie called Fool's Paradise. That was a 45-minute movie, and it took me 7 days to do that. So to do a 17-minute in 12 hours is pretty aggressive. But I've had some projects that I've done that were done really well in the shooting and in the filming itself, which made the editing only take 3 or 4 days. And then that we go back to the apparition. I didn't really, that was what I was using that to really learn how to do I was learning how to make a movie. That's what I wanted to do with the apparition. And I thought when I was done, I was proud of myself. We did that one over a 4-day period. It's a 30-minute film, and I was really proud of myself until I got to the editing table and realized that it was not anywhere near ready to be edited. And so that one took me 9 months to edit because of how I shot it, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And at that time, technology, like we go back to that, that was only, the apparition was only filmed 3 or 4 years ago, and at that time, technology and the editing programs, they all had to be shot in what they call the same frame rate. And basically that's just the shutter opening and closing. And the older programs, you had to have the whole thing shot because I didn't do it on digital. I was still using the videotapes. That the shutter speeds had to be the same. And so I ended up having to go through and completely wash all of my footage in post-production so that I could just start to edit. And like I said, because of the fact that I really didn't know what I was doing, it took me 9 months to edit. But yet the last film that I did called Loser, the guy I work with a lot, and he edited it. It took him 3 days, and so it just kind of depends on how well you do during your actual production, But for anybody listening who is thinking about getting into the filmmaking business, there is no other way to learn unless you go to school. There is no other way to learn except for jumping in there and doing it, taking your licks when it doesn't go so good, and dust yourself off and do it again. That's the only way to learn how to do it. And then you could also go to Maverick Movie Making to help you with that.
Now, I know you probably have it on Maverick Movie Making, but for somebody who's interested in, jumping off and getting their feet wet, what kinds of minimal equipment are they going to need to film and then edit their first movie?
You know what? What I would suggest is that you get used to telling stories. You get used because, the difference, the whole key to independent filmmaking is the story. You can have a really just well done, no flaws, perfect shooting, perfect sound, and if the story sucks, nobody's going to like it. Nobody's going to watch it. But then you can take a movie go back to the Blair Witch Project, or you go back to Paranormal Activity. Those movies were done and then I guess El Mariachi by Robert Rodriguez. Those movies weren't done with a lot of production value. I think El Mariachi and Paranormal Activity were made from anywhere between $7,000 and $12,000. But it's the story that made those movies popular, not how they shot it. And so if you have a good enough story, you can shoot on your cell phone and edit on the editing equipment that the computer that you're listening to this on right now. But for a guy who's getting ready to start, Canon makes a really good line of HD cameras for fairly inexpensive, and so you would need yourself basically what they call a DSLR camera, which is basically a picture camera that takes video, and a microphone to pick that up, and then that's the place to start. And I think that you can pick that stuff up for $600, and that is a lot of money, but it would be well worth it because you get a lot of use out of that. You get a ton of use out of that just being able to take a little camera that you hold in your hand and run around and shoot movies for a year. But you can shoot on whatever you want, but the story has got to be good quality. The story's got to be intriguing. Your characters got to be characters that people can get behind or hate. or love. And the goal that your characters are trying to get to has got to be something that people feel it's worth getting to. Without those elements, you're not gonna, you're not really going to intrigue your audience. You're not going to draw your audience in. And that's the part you have to work on. That's the part that takes the practice, is learning what tells a good story, And it's not a story that other people like. It's a story that you like. Because if you like the story and you're passionate about the story, it'll all kind of fall into place. You'll have that, because one of the things with independent movie making is it's pretty much a one-man show when you're getting started. You're the driving force behind it. You're the guy who puts it all together. You're the guy who gets it, makes sure it stays on time, and you're the guy who finishes it up. And there will be days when you don't really want to do it. And the only thing that gets you through those times when you're not really feeling it is the need to get that story out, because you really feel that you really like it. That you really love the story. You want to share the story with other people. I mean, sometimes that's all that keeps you going. And so it's got to be kind of a labor of love, because once I'll tell you, once you get that out and you've been working on a movie for a year, and once it's out and you're proud of it, there is not a better feeling in the world than seeing your product up on a television or in a movie theater,
Mm-hmm. I could definitely see where it would be very appealing to see your work being seen by other people. And when you are finished with the project and you release it, now, I know in the case of me releasing that first novel, the case of the butterflies, I hadn't experienced that since a kid's first day at school. Okay, I mean, it was like sending a child out into the world. There's a fear of rejection. There's a fear that, you didn't do a good job of telling your story, and all these kinds of things going on. Do you experience that as well?
I do. Actually, the first movie that I ever saw of my own that I put up in the theater, I kind of got misty-eyed when I actually saw that, because it had been something that I'd been trying to do for so long. But a little bit earlier I was talking about having kind of brushing with the studio type of projects, and I really kind of focused on the wrong things. I was focusing on what other people wanted. I was focusing on what other people thought I should do, or what they thought would be a good story. And what I learned was that the further you get away from that, the less passion you have for it, and it starts to become more of a job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't get into this because I needed a job. I got into this because I wanted to tell stories. And after having this 2-year break where I'm able to look back at those experiences, I'm not really concerned with what other people think. I mean, I want my stories to be entertaining, and I want them to speak for themselves, but I want them to be mine. I want them to be what I want put out.
Isn't in general what you're trying to do is trying to let your audience see the story that you saw?
Yes, absolutely.
So, there's always that element of, did you tell the story right? Not necessarily trying to please people, but to lead them to the same place, I guess. Because that's kind of what I was trying to do, is I was trying to tell them the same story that I'd seen, but they had to get there the same way I did, in a sense. Right.
But I think the trick is that, you know what, you draw from your own experiences. You draw from your own experiences when you're telling a story. But most people's most people's lives, aren't interesting all the time.
Oh no.
You may have, like I have a script that's finished right now that I'm getting ready to start shopping, called The Long Way Home, and it is basically a a story about a period of my life, about 6 years, of a 6-year period of my life that I'm compressing into an hour-and-a-half movie. Well, you know, my life doesn't work where each high point or low point in your life is perfectly, you know, there's a bridge between each one that tells this coherent story. And so the trick to telling these stories is to, you kind of have to, I think that's where the term life imitates art, is that you base it on this, but yet you've got to kind of make it interesting, more interesting to intrigue people and still tell the story and still be true to the story. And that's kind of where, I have trouble sometimes, because you want to stay true to the story, but yet you don't want to, you know, not necessarily everything that happens to get you to the point where the story starts is important or interesting, you know?
Right.
And that's kind of one of the things I'm doing with Rest Stop is one of the things that I always try to do is I always try to push myself and put myself into a situation as far as running Lone Dog Productions or making a movie that I've never done before. I'm always trying to challenge myself. It's part of the learning curve. It's part of learning more about it. And one of the things that I've done with Rest Stop is I have written a movie exactly the way I wanted to write it. I didn't write it with a particular audience in mind. I didn't write it with a particular goal in mind. I wrote it because the way that I wrote it because I wanted to see how it was going to be perceived. Subtleties in the storytelling. I actually I made it edgy and coarse, if that makes sense. But yet I also made it subtle, and I want to see if it works. I'm really looking forward to getting audience reaction to see if I can meld all those things together and still have it work, you know. And so it'll be interesting, you know. And that was with the other two shorts that we're doing, the retreads. I want to see if I can give it, you know, like the end of 7 is a really heavy scene, right? Well, I want to see if I can give it that same heaviness, but different, you know, delivered in a completely different way. And so so that's kind of how I like to work things, you know, as I try to make it to where an audience has to kind of guess what I'm trying to tell them, and put in interesting points with the true points of the story, you know, like the script that I had written, and so that's what I kind of like to do. You know, that's what I'm kind of after.
Every time you talk about your movie, the Rest Stop, it makes me think about a road trip I took about 7 years ago. My father had cancer, and my daughter had come, and we were making the road trip from New Orleans to Minnesota, where he lived, to see him. Now, she knew when we were leaving, but being, you know, 20-something and not the primary driver, she decided to go out the night before we left. And as everyone knows, of course, New Orleans is a party town. And so she had drank a wide variety of things in a very brief amount of time, and the inevitable results occurred, in which she became extremely intoxicated and violently ill. And, you know, I did some stupid things, too, like I poured her into the van because I needed to wash it before we left, and took her through one of these drive-through rainbow washes. Don't ever do that if you have a trunk in your car. It was not pretty. You can't escape. You know, when they start throwing up, there's no place to go. You're stuck. Anyhow, you know, we left a little late the next morning. I wasn't sure we were going to be able to leave at all because she was really, really sick. And we had to stop numerous times, so we didn't make very good time. It took me like 4 hours to get to Jackson or something ridiculous. And by the time it comes, you know, where I need to sleep again, we're only in Arkansas, barely. And so we stopped at a rest area so I could sleep for a couple of hours. We're in a van. There's plenty of room to lie down and go to sleep. And, of course, she slept most of the day when she wasn't throwing up. And so she's not sleepy, so she's sitting in the driver's seat playing with computer or something. And in the course of the night, I got woke up, while I was trying to sleep. She saw a ghost in the rest area. There was a mouse in the van from who knows where, and it came out to greet her from the glove box. And just one of those really weird things. I mean, how often do you see a ghost in a rest area? She had the screaming heebie-jeebies over a ghost. I don't know what she saw or whether it was a result of drinking too much the night before, because I was asleep until she shrieked. Yeah, but she said the ghost came out of the restrooms and walked to where the trucks were and then went poof, like ghosts do. It's the vision I'm having of a short movie about a rest area is probably much more weird than most people would have.
Right. Well, the reason that we call it rest stop because the first 6 minutes take place at a rest stop. And it's about the story is about 4 guys who are in a illegal deal, and it catches up with them. Their illegal doings catches up with them at this rest stop, and they have to deal with it right then and there. And so that's kind of in a nutshell, that's what it's about. I'm really reluctant to give too much away because of the nature of what I'm trying to accomplish with it. I'm trying to present it with the least amount of information out there as possible so that people don't get preconceived notions about what it's about. So.
Yeah. Well, that old thing about spoilers is true, too. You don't want to know. I hate it when people tell me how the movie's going to end or how the book's going to end. I don't want to know. Then why bother watching it? I already know how it's going to end. Yeah. So it is interesting. I think about how much movies have changed. Recently we were watching an old episode from the original Star Trek, and they're supposedly landing on a planet where there was nobody. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, there's mower marks, on this supposed meadow. Do I normally notice things like that? Because we've all, I know that there's many movies out there where it was the Old West or it was, some time before airplanes and whatnot, and a jet goes through the sky. Now, usually that stuff's removed in editing, but sometimes little details like that escape.
Right. No, speaking, it's interesting that you mentioned Star Trek because I had briefly mentioned Fool's Paradise, and Fool's Paradise to date is the most aggressive movie that I've done. I had a total of 110 cast and crew. I had 45 pages and 33 scenes in 3 different towns, and we shot it over the course of 7 days. Well, I had a gentleman who was very nice enough to come on board and almost consult for us. And basically what he had done was he was the assistant director for Star Trek. He had been on the original TV show. He had been the assistant director through the whole thing. Worked with Elvis Presley. He worked with Paul Newman, who is another one of my idol, one of my personal idols in this business. But it was really good. It was really good to have that guy around because, especially with the nature of that particular shoot and having so many cast and crew, that he was able to teach me some of the little finer points of how to negotiate that big of a crowd and that monstrous of a shoot. And the movie turned out, really good. And once again, that could be seen on Indie Flicks through Lone Dog Productions. But it's interesting that you mentioned Star Trek because I had Gene DeRule with me for that.
Yeah, my mother was a Trekkie, at least to a degree. So yeah, I'd watched them as a kid, and then my husband's very fond of Star Trek. I have now seen almost all of the episodes of all the Star Treks, I think. Whether I paid attention necessarily, I did like Voyager. That's probably my favorite out of the series. But yeah, I'm not the huge Trekkie that a lot of people are, but some of it I do find interesting.
Yeah, I thought that right now the Star Trek that's in movie theaters is Into Darkness, but the first one of their kind of reboot I thought was done brilliantly. I thought that the way that they wrote the story to start Star Trek from the beginning was absolutely brilliant, and I thought the way J.J. Abrams was able to pull that off, I thought the whole thing. I think that if you're going to do a reboot, and we see all the time about how they're going to reboot such and such a movie franchise. Well, I think that everybody who's ever going to retread another movie, they need to watch that Star Trek with Chris Pine, because I think that one was done brilliantly.
The one that I liked the least was the one, I think they called it Enterprise, where it was supposed to occur before the original one did, prequel. I didn't care for that series, what I've seen of it. I haven't seen all of them in that, and I'm not sure why. And nobody can say those first episodes of Star Trek were so stilted, and the special effects were so bad. I watch it now, and it was a pioneer of its era, but it wasn't. If you put out something like that today, you wouldn't get a second look.
Right.
And it's because of the changes in technology, and it's even for its era, I don't think it was a very high budget program. Yeah,
and I could be wrong, but I think that Star Trek didn't even really reach its full popularity until it was almost over. If not, it was over, by the time it reached its high popularity,
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, that Gene had told me that Shatner could never hit a mark. When your characters are having some sort of blocking and they're supposed to stop on a spot and usually mark a little X on the floor. He told me that the entire time they were shooting, Shatner could never hit the mark. Every time he missed it, and that was for the entire time they were on that show. He never hit one mark throughout the whole thing.
Yeah. And it is interesting to watch, their interpretation then and how it evolved. The movies were much better than the original series. I haven't seen the latest movie. But the movies that they made they had much better special effects. The acting was much smoother. The characters were better developed, and so forth and so on. They looked at home at being whoever they were. And you kind of see that when you see the later series too, because when you like Voyager, which was my favorite of the all the Star Treks, the early episodes of Voyager, many of the actors, it was like the character didn't quite fit them right. It needed some adjustments here and there until it did fit them right. And in later episodes, there wasn't that sort of awkward fit that there was, maybe in the first 4 or 5 of them.
Right.
So it did, it improved. And that, I don't know if it doesn't seem to be an issue that you see in a movie. I don't understand, I'm not an actor, I'm not in the film industry. I'm not even a huge movie watcher or TV watcher. We don't even have television. So, I'm hardly a good critical judge of that kind of thing. But when I do watch it, I guess because I'm a people watcher, movies, the characters seem to be fit better for some reason. And I don't know if it's a difference in how they're filmed versus a series or, a television program. But something's different, because otherwise, you'd be on your 5th movie in a series before, everything came together, and that wouldn't work for the movie industry very well, especially not at $500 million for a movie.
Yeah. No, I think that I always fall back on that bad acting is bad directing. That's what I fall back on all the time. And, those guys, if they throw, they'll do 50 takes before they'll get one that they want, and an actor under those kind of circumstances, he's had 50 times to go through this thing and get it right. And in TV shows, they just don't have the budget to do that. They shoot TV shows a little different, and so they're kind of quick, and sometimes it doesn't work, But like I said, in my opinion, and I always fall back on that, bad acting is bad directing.
It could be. Like I said, I've never been involved in making a movie. My last experience with acting was a high school play many, many moons ago. So obviously it's not a place I've ventured into, but we are running out of time. So before we go, you want to tell everybody where to find your website again?
It's lonedogproductions.com. And then I also you can find the links to any of the stuff that we've talked about, any of the movies that we had. If you're interested in looking at the resources page, there's stuff there. You can find links to Maverick Movie Making off of there. By all means, get in there and take a look at that stuff. And if you have anything you want me to talk about, there's spots in there to send me an email, to leave a comment, whatever you want. Once again, that's lonedogproductions.com.
Okay. Well, folks, we've run out of time once again, but I hope that tonight's program has brought you plenty of food for thought, as well as more illumination for your personal journey towards truth. Tune in again next week as we embark on a whole new topic as we explore permaculture and farming with Chafin Family Orchards. The following week, we're going to be back to the books once again with well-known and much-beloved Piers Anthony, with a rare live interview with the renowned fantasy author. I know that I have worn out more than one of his books. So, with all of that to tease and tantalize, I bid you all farewell. You've been listening to The Dawn of Shades, and I'm your host, Gia Scott, and good night.
Hi, folks, and welcome to the Kevin Smith Show, whoever you are, wherever you happen to be. All